We're in Judges. We began a little humble beginning with Judges chapter 1 last time, and almost everything we have in today's lesson is skipped in most elementary school, middle school, high school textbooks about the book of Judges. It's often just summarized in a little chart. But we're going to walk through it and see what the Lord has to say to us. And there's a couple maps. So now the house of Joseph attacked Bethel, and the Lord was with them. So Bethel is north of what was Jerusalem. Jerusalem, we found out last time, probably still called Salem at this time, but the Israelites attacked it and burned it. It was probably surrounded by nothing more than, probably a wooden palisade or something last time. It didn't become the stone city until after this at some point. And yesterday, my son Peter walked under it through Hezekiah's tunnel. He's there one day behind Brandon Steenbach's tour, which is kind of curious. Now, Peter has with him only one set of shoes. And so we spent money. Our program only allows for one text a day that I can really afford, but we had to have 3 over this one issue because I said, knowing Hezekiah's tunnel sometimes gets wet up to your navel or so, I said, how are your shoes? And he shocked me. He said, I went barefoot. Hezekiah's tunnel is dug unevenly over the course of about 2 miles over stone and gravel. And Peter did it in bare feet, but he's a pretty tough guy. I mean, he sleeps on a floor. I probably shouldn't have told you that, but that's my son Peter. So. What? I'm so sorry. What? How dumb is that? I'm sorry. I probably have my dad Band-Aid in my wallet. I apologize. Here it is. I have always kept, and Donovan, I've always kept a dad Band-Aid in my wallet, and I have never been sorry, because how often does a little kid walk up to me and say, Pastor, I'm bleeding? And I'm like, I have a Band-Aid. And then I become more than a pastor. I become, like an Aquaman kind of a level. Not exactly, but something like that. Can you help me with my owie, please, Mr. Spike? Where am I going? Is that good enough? Yeah, Is that more acceptable socially to everybody? I'm sorry. I'm glad it's like coming out of my eyes or something. That's nice. All right, let's do that discreetly. Like what was it this Sunday in the sermon? What did the guy say? Spit your meat out into your napkin and put it down discreetly on the, I think somebody said that. All right. Okay, back to Bethel and Ai. And there they are. They won a couple of victories. When they sent men to spy out Bethel, formerly called Luz. So Bethel is the name that Jacob gave it. If you remember, why did Jacob call it Bethel? Bethel means house of God. But in the meantime, that's a couple hundred years ago. Jacob is maybe 1900 BC. This is 13-something BC. So some people have moved in there, and it's got a different name. So suddenly what was Pauket became Oshakata until the new people moved in, and now it's called Poinet. So the story of my hometown. So nobody remembers the Oshakata anymore except a few people from 1820 or so. So they sent men to spy out Bethel, formerly called Luz, and the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, you can imagine them grabbing this guy? They said to him, show us how to get in the city and we'll see that you are treated well. So, a pretty good deal. It reminds me a little bit of Rahab and the spies down at Jericho, and this guy is like, okay. So he told them about a way to take the city. He showed them, and they put the city to the sword and spared the man and his whole family. He then went to the land of the Hittites, that's way up north, where he built a city and called it Luz, which is its name to this day. So what would have been the way into this city? If Luz at that time were a walled city, then very likely it had a traditional gate. City gates usually were made of stone, had a roof of stone or brick or something, and they all had, entering into the city, a right-hand turn. All of them. This meant that you had to go in if you had your sword drawn to attack the city, and you didn't have anywhere to swing because you're going to have to make a right-hand turn around a corner. You can imagine a right-hand corner in your house, and you go past that thing. That's not a natural turn. Or you're going to be wielding it with the wrong hand, or some kind of a backslash where you're maybe not as proficient. But all the guys on the inside are going to be swinging freely in that right-hand corner. That's what it's designed for. So it was probably not that entrance, but maybe some back door or some back entrance to the city that this guy, or maybe there was a sluice gate where the water came in. Anybody see the Lord of the Rings and so how Saruman got in and into the Hornburg and so forth with was it the big orc with the torch who jumps in on top of the, I assume, did Saruman invent gunpowder and not the Chinese? So, okay, that's okay. Father Tolkien can do whatever he wants to, So we had a couple of successes. Jericho, Jerusalem, Bethel. But now the rest of the chapter, Manasseh, Ephraim, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, Dan, all fail. So imagine taking one final and then fail, 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 fail. So, sorry, Bethany. Okay, and Manasseh did not drive out the people of Beth-shan. Fascinating that the author singles out Beth-shan at this moment, or Tanakh, or Dor, or Ibleam, or Megiddo, and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land. These are the places that are in between Mount Carmel and the middle of that valley kind of goes down to the southeast and cuts in a very good place of the Jordan River. And it's a wonderful area. It's kind of the dividing line between Samaria and Galilee in the New Testament. None of those cities are driven out, but that he would mention Beth-shan. Beth-shan is known primarily for one thing in the Bible. After King Saul died at the end of 1 Samuel, they nailed up some of his remains at Beth-shan. That's what happened there. And his girlfriend came and took down the remains and those of his sons, and she laid them out under a tree and stayed with them for, I think it's months, until David found out and was really impressed by that loyalty. She kept the birds she couldn't bury them, but she could keep the birds away, and that's what she did, and the wild animals. Amazing. But that's the other thing that happened at Beth-shan. We don't know who wrote Judges. We don't know who wrote 1 Samuel. Did the author connect the two books? Is it the same author? Maybe. The fascinating thing about Judges and 1 Samuel is that they also are two books that use the same odd expression about falling words, or this or that falling, or letting go. It doesn't get used other places in the Bible. Is that a peculiarity to that author? I don't know. But it's an interesting little puzzle that we have. Not sure about that. When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. This is a later comment by the author, not editorial, but by the author about what happened later on. And then I like this map a lot. It's pretty cool. Nor did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer. Gezer is a village on the edge of the Philistine territory. I believe this map has Gezer too far north. I think that Gezer should really be at the southern end of my triangle. And I don't know, but human beings make these maps, and sometimes. But I believe that the trade route from Jericho, that if it did go to Gezer, would have gone much farther south. But that is the Via Maris, the way of the sea, that came from Egypt all the way up along the central plain of Philistia, and then up near the Esdraelon Valley, and then over more toward Galilee and up to Hazor, and beyond to places like Megiddo and Mount Hermon and things like that. So, but Gezer is also famous outside the Bible because it gives us something. If you have a study Bible, like the NIV study Bible, or if you just have a Bible that has a chart of the calendar. Oh, I was home. No, I haven't been home yet. I was going to bring it, but I haven't gone there yet today. If you have a chart of the calendar in the Bible, there will be several months in the calendar that have a star by them because they're not mentioned in the Bible. We know this name, but it's not in the Bible. And the place where we get them is from a little boy's lost homework. I myself made a duplicate of this archaeological artifact. It's called the Gezer calendar. It's about the size of President Peterson, would you hold up your cell phone for a moment so we can see the back? The Gezer, hold it up this way. That's the size and shape of the Gezer calendar. Everybody got it? So it's a very small little slab of clay. You can put it down now or whatever. Can you imagine though the little boy who was making the Gezer calendar? It was his homework. And you can tell it because the teacher's penmanship up on top is much better than the boy's terrible penmanship down below. The boy even from there to there spells some words wrong. It only has 4 letters, kid. But, SOTP spells stop, or pots or whatever, I don't know. And so as the little boy is writing this, he writes down the names of the months. So that's how we have them, because he lost his homework. Can you imagine being able to tell your teacher, I lost my homework, and I can prove it because it's in a museum, something like that. So that'd be pretty cool. But the Gezer calendar that's how we know. But it's a tiny little artifact, kind of a cool little thing. Neither did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites living in Kitron or Nahalal, who remained among them, but they did subject them to forced labor. These villages are near Nazareth today, kind of in that area. That's really Zebulun. If you remember the prophecy, but Zebulun and Naphtali, the way of the sea, out of you will come, so. Nor did Asher. Asher was way up. Asher is the Washington state of the Holy Land, the Pacific Northwest. So it's way up in the corner up there. And neither did Asher drive out those living in Akko or Sidon or Achlab or Aksib or Helba or Athek or Rehab. I should have gotten one of you to read those words. I'm sorry. You know what the secret is to reading Bible names? Confidence. Yeah, just say it louder than anybody else. My high school choir teacher, Mrs. Lefebvre, told me once, she said, Tim, you sing louder than the other tenors. If you come in early on this song in Handel's Messiah, everyone will think you're right and the rest of the choir is wrong. I never forgot that. And I found out how right she was chanting last night in church. So I guess I was right and everybody else was wrong. So because of this, people of Asher lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land. So the Aksib is there, the ladder of Tyre. You see the words at the top of the screen, I think, right? The ladder of Tyre. That's because the land acts like a big stairway, except it's pretty steep, so it's almost more like a ladder, or like my basement stairway, which can't possibly beat a code. That thing, there's no way. I'm pretty sure stairways are supposed to go like this and not like this, and the treads are not supposed to be that, half of my shoe. But But that ladder of Tyre takes you up a considerable height up into the mountains of Lebanon, where the big trees go. Another reason why I equate Lebanon and that area with the Pacific Northwest is because they have the same big trees, the big pines, right? Cedars in the Bible, but what do they have up in the Northwest? What are they? Sequoias, stuff like that, yeah. All right. Neither did Naphtali drive out those living in Beth Shemesh or Beth Anath, but the Naphtalites too lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land, and those living in Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced laborers for them. Beth Shemesh, house of the sun. Beth Anath, house of Anath. We're going to come back to that word in chapter 3, not today, but next week, because Anath comes into the story of the third judge, Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar. Shamgar does not have an Israelite name. Might have been a mixed marriage between an Israelite mom and a Canaanite dad or something like that. And he may have, his father might have been named after a god, a Canaanite god, but fought for Israel. I wrote about Shamgar in my email devotions on Leviticus. Anyone remember that? Probably not. Okay, not a big deal. Anyway, I thought Leviticus would be, for some people, the most boring book in the Bible. And so every Friday, rather than write a devotion on the text, I wrote little stories about a family obeying the law rather than, things like that. And things that happened with the family, like the day that they had to jump over the corpse of the lizard, and when they brought home a giraffe, and what do we do for a sacrifice, and because where do you slit its throat, and all kinds of things like that. And at the end of that, I thought it would be more interesting for people. And their uncle was a Levite, and he showed them around the tabernacle and stuff like that. And they went to visit their grandmother who lived by Beersheba and so forth. And then in the last devotion, it's talking about. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I don't want to interrupt you.
I'm just rambling. Go ahead.
With the forced labor in the ceremonial law, there must have been things that the Israelites wouldn't allow the slaves to do. What was the nature?
Do you mean to tell me that you think they were following the ceremonial law in the time of the judges? I'm coming back to that point. They had the law, they had the tabernacle, but the Levites are all wandering beggars. They're not following the law, they're following Baal. So, sorry, that's my answer. Yeah. Was I talking about something else? You'll have to buy my commentary on Leviticus and read it for yourself. Okay. The Amorites confined the Danites to the hill country, not allowing them to come down into the plain. The Amorites were determined also to hold out in Mount Heres, Aijalon, and Shaalbim. But when the power in the house of Joseph increased, when they got a better army, they too were pressed into forced labor. The boundary of the Amorites was from the Scorpion Pass, that's that thing, to Selah and beyond. So the ascent of Akrabim is Scorpion Pass. And if you have ever read anything about the Crusades, do you know about the guy from Monty Python, Terry Jones, who recently passed away, I think? Did Terry Jones just die? I think last year maybe. But Terry Jones did a series for the Arts and Entertainment A&E Network about the Crusades. I think MLC actually has it on disc or on videotape. I'm pretty sure Paul Calpine used it to teach his class. But he talks about the ascent of Akrabim quite a bit because the Crusaders ended up having to use this to get to and from across the Dead Sea, from below the Dead Sea quite a bit. So, all right. Anything on chapter 1? Chapter 2, the angel of the Lord at Bochim. How do we know if it's the angel of the Lord or if it's just a regular old angel? Is it the second person of the Trinity, or is it Gabriel's roommate? Aaron?
Second person of the Trinity.
No, I mean, how do we know that?
Because he speaks as though he's
Okay, we find out from the way he speaks. Yeah, I want to make that clear. There's a mistake in one of our Wells People's Bibles. Oops. The author says, well, if it's all capitals, then it must be the angel. It must be. Well, no, that's not how we do that. And also, it's always all capitals. But we find out if it's the angel of the Lord, who's Jesus, the pre-incarnate Christ, by how does he talk? Does he say I when he's talking about something divine? That's how we know. Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt. There it is. Into the land which I swore to give to your fathers. There it is again. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall, two things, make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land, and second, you shall break down their altars. So no agreements and smash their altars. There cannot be a mixture of religions. But you have not obeyed my command. What is this you've done? Sorry about that. That's from Jericho. Bochim is not very far, about halfway to Bethel or so. Also, I'm just going to tell you that the Hebrew verb baka means to cry or weep. Baka. Can you hear that? Just like means laugh. That's how Yitzhak, Isaac, means laughter. So blubbering is to cry, okay? I'll come back to that. So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become adversaries. Adversaries. Watching too much Sean Connery movies. Adversaries to you, and their gods shall be a snare to you. When the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and do it. And so they called the name of the place Bochim, weepings. That's what that word means. Thank you, President Peterson. God bless you. Our congregation president, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Spike. Soon to be able to remain at Bible class as he soon gets replaced on the board of adult discipleship. Yeah, we shall see. And verse 5, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. The people make a sacrifice. Did they do it properly where the altar was and the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle? We're not told that, and I don't know what to say. Maybe. When Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land, but we've already seen they didn't do that. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, a couple of them, who had seen all the great work which the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. My grandma Dorothy lived to be 102, and she had her mind and her memory and could still scold me at 102. Congratulations on reaching 102, Grandma. I don't see why you're congratulating me. You know, she had her mind. And we had a lady in New Ulm who lived to be 111 or more. 14? 114 at Oak Hills, a St. John's member, right? And but Joshua lived to be 110. And they buried him within the bounds of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres. I'll make that spin. In the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gaash. That's pretty far in, considering they hadn't conquered very much. But the people of Ephraim had quite a bit of their territory by this time, I think, staked out. Shechem, Aphek, Mizpah, Gezer, you see there again. Bethel, it wouldn't be called Shechem yet. No, I'm thinking of Samaria. It wouldn't be called Samaria. Anyway, and all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work which he had done for Israel. Remember in Exodus when we kind of gasp at the beginning of the book because there was a Pharaoh who did not remember Joseph? And you think, how could you not remember Joseph? Well, I mean,
somebody forgot to teach it.
sure. How many of you remember Calvin Coolidge? Or know who he was? He was one of our presidents. What was his nickname? Anybody know? Silent Cal. He was not known for his great oration. Silent Cal. Yeah. So now we have a generation who did not remember what happened. It can happen very quickly. Somebody in the family marries somebody of a different denomination, and suddenly, not only are they no longer of our faith, but because of their spouse, they become hostile to our faith, antagonistic to our faith. Maybe their spouse wants them to tell them all the bad things that happened to them there, as if something bad doesn't happen to every single person who's ever lived. Of course, everybody had one thing rotten happen in fourth grade or something like that. Does that make the whole synod rotten? You know, or if something bad happened to me in high school, does that make the entire public school system rotten? Yes, of course it does. No, I'm just kidding. But no, not necessarily. But some people lose sight of that. They apply one thing to the whole, or the whole to the one thing. So what did they have? I have this on your sheet. Oh, I was going to do all kinds of things. I forgot to talk about wipers. Didn't I? Did you see that on the sheet? In the middle, yeah, at Bokeem, weepers. One of the first great battle places of World War I was in Belgium, at a place spelled Y-P-R-E-S, and the British couldn't pronounce it correctly. I mean, how do you pronounce a Belgian French word, right? So what did they call it? Their commanders knew they'd better not think that their soldiers are going to learn how to say Ypres. So everybody in Britain called it wipers. Because if you're the commander of an army, do you care if they learn the language, or do you care if they read the map right? That's the only thing that matters, right? And so it officially became pronounced wipers for a while. But wipers also sounds like weepers, and that's what Bokeem means. That's why I put that on there. I wanted to talk about that. But did I also miss talking about Timnath Harris when Joshua died? I did. I got carried away. Sun Valley, or portion of the sun, is what that means. You've been listening to Invisible Church, the Bible study podcast from St. Paul's Lutheran Church, New Ulm, Minnesota.